How we doing, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to say that I'm joined by Chris Ross, who's one of the youngest CEOs in Britain when he was at Morton, then he was at Stevenage, and also when he was in Atlantic City in America. Chris, thanks for coming on, mate.
Thank you very much, mate. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. How's yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah.
Excellent. Just before we start, we'll give a big shout out to our sponsor. It's Starner Apparel. So Starner is an independent fashion brand from Scotland, creating high quality and stylish attire for on and off the terraces. Inspired by terrace culture, lifestyle and music, all of their clothing is designed using quality materials and workmanship to combine the very best style and fit. All of this means you get a premium quality fashion at affordable prices while enjoying a simple and secure service. You can check them out at www.starnerapparel.co.uk. I'm actually wearing a wee Starner t-shirt tonight. Chris said before we came on, he thought I looked very handsome. Very handsome. I was like, I appreciate that, mate. But so, Chris, how's things? I know that you've kind of been out the game for a wee while. What have you been doing with yourself the last few
Yeah,
months?
that's right. So I came back up the road to Scotland in 1st of February. So 1st of February, I back up the road fully. And yeah, since then, I've been quite fortunate. I've been lucky enough to work for two wealthy businessmen. I've been doing their private investment portfolio, which has been keeping me ticking over. But yeah, prior to that, obviously, even right up till just the other day, going back there for the end of season promotion that was at Barrow on that final day with Stevenage this year.
That's brilliant. So, I was obviously we've kind of spoken, we've been talking back and forward for maybe a month or two now, and your story's quite interesting. CEO at Morton at 26, which is something that's very impressive for somebody so young, and that's off the back of being at Atlantic City, starting pretty much a new club from scratch in America. We'll go back to how this all came about for you. Edinburgh Uni you were at. How did things start with you for this?
Well, it probably actually came from the flip side of football, which is the complete opposite, really. The probably the charitable foundations and the trusts. So it probably happened by chance, but as a young lad in uni, I was doing community education, so it was all about charities, the third sector. You do lots of volunteering, lots of fundraising, and that was really what I was good at. I was good at fundraising, so grants, tenders, bids to National Lottery, Heritage Lottery, any of the major players. That was really my bread and butter, and I was doing that. I was doing that first of all just in the third sector, so community food initiatives and varying causes, and then eventually I wanted to combine it into sport, and so I focused in more on supporting charitable trusts and foundations attached to football clubs, and really that's where it came about. So you started to get actively involved in these charities. What I had as opposed to a full-time living while you're at university was I would do a day for Ross County's charity, a day for Kilmarnock's charity, a day for Clyde's charity, and it was really that kind of movement that saw me make a living at that age. And from there, obviously, when you're running a charity, it's like running a business, and you still have to follow a lot of the same principles. And so from there, I wanted really the chance to learn at the club side. So off I went to the States, and did a summer season in the States with them in the NPSL, which is a mad league in itself, because it's probably one of the few leagues that really, really does mix amateur, semi-pro, and pro in the same groups.
How does being 18 when you start uni to 22 when you finish, or 21 when you finish, how do you have an interest in doing things for charities and try to kind of build that kind of lifestyle and business for yourself? It's not something I'd ever have thought about at that age. So what drove you to get
Well, I
involved
was
in
at,
that?
I was actually a little bit later into uni, so that would be the timeline. So when I left school, I just went into working. So because I was already doing sort of third sector work, I'd done a little very small stints in places like Citizens Advice, Council for Voluntary Organisations. Then I went into uni because I didn't really have the academic background at all, didn't really have the qualifications, but if you did a course like community education and you'd kind of worked in that field, they gave you an opportunity. So because I was a late to the party university student, that probably helped, and that was already what I'd been working on.
You mentioned Clyde, Ross County, and Kilmarnock. How do you end up getting involved with these clubs? Did somebody put you onto them, or did they contact you? Or
It was kind of a snowball from it would have been me pushing, but it was really a snowball effect. So I think, like everybody else, when I first wanted in, I must have wrote to every single foundation and trust and saw if anyone wanted a hand, and no one really did, and no one needed it. But Clyde went and done it. We started to get a bit of success with some applications. Then a couple of the other ones needed a hand. You'd move into there, and really it went from there. So it was really a kind of snowball effect of we brought in some successful funds at Clyde, and then we were looking to replicate that with the other trusts and foundations. And these are all places as well which probably weren't looking for someone to come in and fundraise full time, if that makes sense. Probably didn't have the money for that, but to pay someone 1 day a week and tick them over and tick you over, it was perfect.
How does that transfer into benefiting the club? Obviously, there's outside aspects that can benefit the community and stuff, and it's stuff that I know that you are very interested in. We'll touch on it when we talk about Atlantic City, about getting the community involved. How does that stuff benefit the clubs?
I think it benefits the clubs massively, but I don't think at the time anything that I was doing as such benefited the club. I think I was coming at it more. I think most of the work that you're doing at that point is more at a project level for the foundations. It is distance from the club, but I think where it crosses over is the clubs are now really linking in a lot closer than they maybe have in the past. And so, when I was doing that, I was solely under foundations. There was no involvement in football. There was, no understanding or experience in football at that stage. But, there was a lot of good skills in terms of, writing business plans, writing project plans, developing fundraising and cash flows. So there was that side of it. And obviously the money that you then raised was then used to do, many of the great projects you see today, from walking football to, children's food poverty camps where they get to kick a ball and have a bit of food if it's a warm meal in the winter and things like that. And so there was always massive impact in that respect. But it was more, impacting at a grassroots level than anything, at the professional.
I think that you're mentioning the grassroots stuff there. Something I've always thought, that clubs should have a duty to the local community where they should try and help, because particularly in the UK, football's the national sport. But I also think, in a kind of selfish way, it benefits clubs in the long run, because you end up with kids who are in about the club that might not have been, because you're talking about the food bank stuff and all that, where you could have poorer kids who that's their aspirations to be a football player, they potentially get out of poverty or whatever, and then they could end up getting involved in the club, and that's the club have been able to get people who they probably wouldn't be able to touch without these kind of projects.
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly it. Even we know full well that a lot of people might be coming to those programs who, when you access them at the foundation or at that level with some of those outreach programs, they may not even have an interest in football, but you've brought them in the door and they're starting to see what your club's about, right? And you make a lot of fans from it if you can engage it at that level. Now, okay, a lot of people sometimes are going through tough times on some of these projects, or maybe aren't your traditional paying customer. But I think as you engage them in the project, in those later years, or when they're on better times, you're 100% going to benefit from that as a football club. And obviously, as a charity, you see that impact day to day, and then the club, you're wearing the club brand, so then the club gets that impact. That's really the knock-on effect from it. Moving
on to Atlantic City, how did that come about for you? I mean, I've asked you how you ended up in these clubs, that's no what would be perceived as far-fetched to go into a Clyde to help with stuff like that. How did Atlantic City come about for you?
So Atlantic City came about because I'd known the owner for a while. I'd been looking at kind of what was the transition into the game, and most of it I thought was going to be I was maybe going to have to go into the university football team and maybe help them out in the Lowland League, and just somebody who needed a hand but didn't have the capital or didn't need the role. You had to go in somewhere where there was going to be an opportunity, but so I'd been looking at if I could get into semi-pro, junior level, just get to see behind the scenes of a football club, start to see operations. But an opportunity came up for what is in effect a summer season, but we were able to plan it a lot quicker. But the NPSL at the time basically ran from March through to July, and if you made playoffs, you maybe got an extra couple of weeks on your schedule. So it was the perfect kind of summer season, and really I knew Drew already. We were already in contact. I had a few contacts in the States and a few other mates who were also involved, mainly in the playing side, so mainly playing in clubs over there, maybe through college or scholarships, but. that's how that came about. And Drew basically said, look, Chris, do you know what? I think I could actually, I think I could look after you over a full season. You'd be fine. We can put you up. We can, give you an opportunity to learn football, and you can make a bit of money from it. So there was that opportunity, and that in itself was exciting. It was a chance to really bridge it. He'd said, look, if you bring the community stuff and the aspect of fundraising, raising the profile in the community, what you also get to do is get a full understanding of off the pitch and how it works, and be a part of team operations, and be a part of player registrations, compliance, you name it. And so that was that. And so all the way from physically going over, and even in the pre-stages from here, you were starting to learn and learn the behind the scenes on what the compliance is for a club, what has to be registered, and it was really good, because I'm glad I went in at that level because of the mixture. So because you are in a mixed league with professional, some semi-pros, and then some that were just wanting to play, a college summer season at amateur, you really had the opportunity to see all the different contracts. You had an opportunity to see all the different registration processes depending on what the player was, and it just opened my eyes to it. Now, Atlantic City weren't a full-time team. We weren't, not at all. But it was a time when US football was struggling. There wasn't any MLS Next. There wasn't any NISA. There wasn't even USL 1 in Champ to the level there is now. And so what you had is you had the fall of the NASL, which was like that kind of former pro league that sat below. And a lot of the big teams from then, the guys like New York Cosmos, Jacksonville Armada, Detroit City before they went into the championship, these were all playing in NPSL that summer. So these clubs were there, they were full time, and there was an opportunity really to go in and compete and see what you could do. Now, it probably had some advantages that it was a club that was just founded that year. It was just founded. It was going to play its first ever matches, and that's what we did right through to pre-season in the league. But you got to see everything. We didn't have a home, so we had to start by trying to get the venue. And oh, by God, what an effort that was, because Atlantic City didn't have a mass of soccer pitches in it. And so we actually ended up starting out by playing in Stockton University, which was 15 miles outside. A beautiful venue, but I mean, again, then when you're talking about your community, and if you're wanting to build your profile in Atlantic City, I don't know how many are going to be able to travel 15 miles out where there's not really any public transport. So that was a challenge, but just eye-opening, being able to learn from the beginning. And that's what I did. Got to learn under the manager was Christian O'Leary, ex kind of Swansea player and coach. So again, masses of experience. We had Jeremiah White in as the technical director, who'd played for the US men's team and had a fairly successful career as well. So we just surrounded ourselves with good people, and then we went on a learning process.
You're only 23 this time. Why is somebody giving you this opportunity? I know you're saying you knew Drew and stuff before, but why is he giving you this opportunity at 23 when you have no experience and you're basically going in there to help them build a club? Why do you think that they've gave you that opportunity?
I think part of it was right timing, and the other part was also obviously that I've always probably been a little bit mature in that sense for my age, in terms of I can do a bit of cash flow forecasting, I can do a little bit of of spreadsheets, financial control, I can do a bit of that, but I'm also able to kind of grab that social impact that was needed, and I think what you saw in Atlantic City was an absolute hotbed where everybody loved baseball and American football, right? But football and soccer was bottom of the pile, not really any major interest, but a massive ability to tap into it. Is that if we were to go in and start a project in Florida and New York, there would be other football teams, there'd be other soccer teams. Yeah. Here there was nothing. I think there had been an attempt to make one 8-9 years prior that never really took off, and here was an opportunity to have. And if you think about one club cities, look how well they do. There was an opportunity to kind of replicate that model, was what we were thinking.
What's the population of Atlantic City in that kind of area in Jersey?
So it is fairly low, and the difficulty you've got is, I'll get you the exacts just now, but in my head I want to say it was maybe around 80,000, right? It wasn't huge, but what you had was a summer season. What you had was a massively seasonal city. Atlantic City back in the day was a hotspot, but it used to exist before the likes of Vegas. Then that kind of market went away. But in terms of Friday to Sunday, Atlantic City was booming. It's a commuter place. People will come for the nights out from New York and from Philadelphia. But it was a city that needed a lot of work. But I think that the market was there. I mean, it had a lot of people who Monday to Thursday there wasn't a lot going on in that place. If you weren't looking for concerts, casinos, nightlife, there wasn't a lot of activity going outside of that. Even the actual venue that we wanted, which was the former baseball stadium, which was in the city that we wanted to obtain. I mean, that baseball team wasn't even running either. So there wasn't really any other sports going on in the area massively. There was things that would come in. Things like massive esports events or the UFC thing. Some things would come through, but we saw an opportunity there.
I've been to Atlantic City. I think I was there about, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 years ago. And I had a good wee win in the Trump Hotel, so I quite enjoyed my day there. But I'd been in New York. But I know a very small amount about kind of college type football in America. My brother played there for 4 years in upstate New York, and then he's involved in running an academy in the Northeast America to this day. So he's been there for like nearly 20 years now. But just to go back to you taking that job on, now you've come across very confident. You've had a couple of really good jobs since in the UK. But 23-year-old, what's your mindset at this time? How are you feeling? Because I could imagine that being exceptionally nerve-wracking, having that amount of responsibility on you.
And probably my wife, although we weren't married at the time, she came with me, grounded me the whole way. But I think really I went as a learning opportunity, and that's really how I've went into a lot of things, in life. Is that I've not really came in, expecting I know what to do or coming in and demanding that this is the way I'm going to do things. I've always went in and been open to just learning and working with the existing staff, existing processes. And what was great about that was you were bringing in an experienced head coach, you were bringing in an experienced technical director. Okay, me and the ownership were learning, but we'd complemented ourselves with the right people. We felt that we would put the time and the hours in, and we did. We put the hours in to learn all the processes and the procedures, and really we went on that journey together. And it wasn't smooth sailing, it wasn't easy. But I tell you what, even just as daft as kicking off your first preseason friendly and seeing the team win, I mean, what a feeling that was, and actually seeing that some fans, although it was only a couple hundred, came out. That was the big anticipation, right? Would we even get an audience from it? So yeah,
I can imagine that was difficult. I was part of St Peter's, who play the old juniors west of Scotland. The first season they started, who they're well known in the west of Scotland for their youth academy and stuff. But I was part of the senior team that started 2 years ago. And I remember how difficult that was, and my part was very small. I basically put the team together. Me and my mate, I was his assistant, but I had most of the contact, so I pretty much put the team together. And that was a difficult experience, like at such a small scale. You've had to do that with the team, but you've had to do that with a full club. What were the biggest challenges you faced? I mean, you talk about the situation where you had to go to Stockton, which is 15 miles outside Atlantic City. What other big difficulties did you face?
Yeah, so we faced a few. That the stadium was the big one and the pressing one, and I'm pleased to say that it took a season or two to get out of the line, and it happened after me. But we did eventually manage to obtain that stadium. We just were not able to get through the logistics and the competition for it at that time, and in the timeline we needed to play the season. The other major challenges, obviously, which comes with playing in that is in order to make the NPSL viable or financially sustainable for teams. Naturally, they break it into conferences, so we would only play, New Jersey, New York, Philadelphia-based teams, maybe, and that was as far as we would go. And then if you made playoffs, there's a bit of funding there unlocked to support you to travel out to the other states, which worked. But I think the other real challenge we faced was in that competition. So we weren't a full-time club, and we were going up against full-time clubs, so we had to try and think outside the box, and we've seen it at junior, we've seen it at part-time, but whilst we couldn't offer them a full-time living, we did access partnerships with local businesses. We had the opportunity to house players, which helped, so we were able to house people over that kind of summer period and make that attractive to people. We couldn't really offer anyone a full-time wage, but we obviously had the ability to try and get them a job, and we established a fantastic partnership with the main sponsor, the Tropicana, which is a big hotel resort and casino, not as big as Trump's one, but it was a major player there. And these things helped us, unlock and give people other skills outside of football. But we I'd be lying if I said we didn't face challenges where people went, no, I just want to play or I don't want to do that. We also had the ability, obviously, which you might know through your brother, but camps and clinics are so lucrative, right? And they're so popular over there that, for a lot of the senior players, and we got a lot of really experienced players in, which was useful. A lot of them wanted to go that route, so they were like, "Well, we'll tell you what, if I can make my money up through doing some coaching and moving into that level, taking your camps and clinics, I'll do it." And some people rolled up their sleeves and done that, and what an effort! We did get some boys who had played, at the very highest level of the States, who were prepared to come in and roll up their sleeves, and done that, done camps, clinics, and played the game, and that's how they made the living.
I think that's, you touch on the camps and clinics, that's something my brother will say to me during the summer. Like, he's bringing one of his girls' teams over to Belfast in July. He did it last July as well, playing what was the Milk Cup. And he tells me the price that some of the parents pay for their kids to play the summer. It's insane. Like, it's almost like it's no a working class sport in a sense, because back here, it's like everything's your 40-50 pound a month for kids to play at their clubs, and that's kind of just the way it is. And I don't think you could ever really ask parents to be paying the hundreds or thousands of dollars that parents pay there. You're saying you brought in higher level players, and that's how they've made a bit of extra money up. Was it difficult to get good quality players? Because that is still quite a relatively low level of football in America.
Well, it was, and we really struggled in our conference. We even attracted a couple of players that then, obviously with our kind of the way our contract's structured, I mean, we don't have them on a full-time basis, right? We lost a couple of our best, or we thought were going to be our best, because they just got better deals later down the line. We had a couple fall through. They went to rival clubs in the conference. I mean, New York Cosmos were still playing at the time. I know they've kind of now taken another break and they might come back, but New York Cosmos were playing, and a lot of the players we went in for in the market were in the same market as New York Cosmos. I mean, we're all chasing players in this New Jersey, New York region that can get down and train with us. It maybe takes them an hour to get there. That was the same market. And yeah, we lost players. We lost players to another very successful team, which founded around about the same time, called FC Motown. And they've just taken off. I mean, they're now in, I think they're in USL 2, so they moved over leagues, but they've got a right, I think, for USL 1, and again, they've just had constant success. But even so a lot of our really good players either departed to go to these guys, or they just got better offers, and we weren't going to stand in anyone's way either with that. So yeah, that was part of the challenge. But we did find a market. We were also very successful at getting college players who took their breaks over the summer and wanted to keep playing football, who actually, summer season and in Atlantic City, which is the perfect summer destination for some of these youngsters, was also the right place. But making sure they were grounded, and making sure that there's a lot of temptation in Atlantic City, so following that was also part of it. But yeah, we had a mixture, young and old, and we followed through the process.
What was the standard like at the NPSL? Like, people who don't really know, they hear about college football, they'll be like, oh, it might not be the best standard. But that's where most of your national players come from, that play for the US and Canada and stuff like that. And like, I remember my brother when he was at it was Albany and Hartwick he went to in New York. And I remember him playing against Morris Edu, who obviously played in the national team, played for Rangers. So it shows that the level of player that is there. What would you say the NPS level is like as a standard?
See, it is very mixed. It's very mixed, and where it's at now, I'm not sure compared to where it was now. But there is some real talent in there. I mean, I'm trying to think now of the boy's name, but even the season that Kilmarnock got relegated from the Scottish Premier League, I'm watching, and the boy that's coming on and scoring for them and hitting penalties, I'll pull up his name before the end of the call. Go back to it. But we had him. We played against him in our opening game, preseason friendly against Nebraska Bug Eaters, and I personally didn't remember him from that match, but he ended up managing to force his way into the Kilmarnock team in the Scottish Premier League. So it was done. There was a route. There was lots of players who've went on and been successful from it. But it's hard because you're not playing in. It's not like Scotland where you're trying to get into one of 42 teams. There's hundreds of teams right across the conferences, and then all of a sudden you're trying to stand out from hundreds of teams, and it is very mixed. There's some very, very good teams there that wipe the flow of their conferences, and then there's some teams that are trying to grow and do it differently. And I personally thought the standard was mixed. But what I did find was that actually see the facilities second to none. Anywhere you went, the facilities were. If we could have that in the UK, you'd bite people's hands off.
I think that's, you touch on that there with the facilities. I remember going over to see my brother his first year at Albany, and that would have been like, I don't know, maybe 2007 or something like that. And I went over, and it was March, early March in New York, like a foot of snow, -15. It was the coldest I've ever experienced in my life. But they had an indoor pitch with a big dome and stuff on it, and they weren't exactly an amazing uni. You're like, the facilities were just miles beyond what we have here. I mean, it's, you look at some of the pitches our kids play on, and it's no wonder that we probably don't progress to the level that we should progress to.
Mm-hmm.
But moving on for the kind of playing side of the game, you finished 6th in the conference that season, the season you're there. What was your aims and long-term aims for the club? Obviously, you're not there now, but what was the aims that you yourself and the owners had?
We were quietly pleased. I mean, we had been hoping to sneak into the playoffs. I mean, in that league, a couple more points or one more win, we might have snuck it. So that the kind of top 5 are going to go off in that mini league and get that chance to go to one, compete for honours in that conference, because I know it's very well talked about, but it's very similar to Pedro Caixinha when he won that league in Mexico, where you can, as long as you're in the playoff mix at the end of the season, even if you're 5th, you've got a chance at having that title, because you're then going to play a knockout for that title. But then obviously the winner of that going into the national stuff and going up against teams from Miami, Chattanooga, the other states. Yeah, we were quietly pleased, maybe a little bit disappointed that we just not made that cut, but the team managed to get the following year, so they were pleased after that. So
you've ended up leaving Atlantic City,
right.
You've gone to Morton. Was that an opportunity that was posed to you, or was it one that you went looking for?
There was actually a bit of time in between it. So I came back. My wife and I, we got married. I then had some time kind of pottering about, if you like, that model that I kind of had with the trusts and foundations. For a while, I teetered on doing it for football clubs, right? So in Scotland, I started doing some work with Stirling Albion, Edinburgh City, clubs who weren't full-time, didn't require a CEO, or didn't have the money for a CEO, but would have loved someone to kind of offer some of those kind of services, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so I just went my own way, management consultancy, offering a bit of time to these kind of clubs, and a bit of consultancy with Altrincham down in the National League, who were part-time at the time, although they're full-time now, and just really went out and done a day wherever the work required, and done it like that. But it was always at clubs who didn't really have a CEO or didn't have any full-time needs, but allowed me to continue to get an insight into how football works at that kind of semi-pro level as a step into the full-time.
Do you put yourself out there to get these places? The fact that you've been able to work with so many different clubs all over the place, are you putting yourself in a position?
So that was all self kind of self-pushing and self-procurement. As I said, we had the pandemic going on, we had everything else. So if I wasn't chasing to see where I might have got the income from, well, that was it. But I was successful enough to muck through most of that pandemic myself, and then obviously we just had our firstborn, and the Morton vacancy was there. I put in for it, as you do when you're thinking, right, okay, a bit closer to the house, maybe a little bit more. Don't need to drive down to Manchester, don't need to drive the other end. It just offered that little bit more continuity, and it was only 45 minutes an hour from the house.
How was things with you and your wife when you're doing all this travelling to, say, Manchester, different places? What kind of strain does that put on you as a newly married couple, and you're still young as well? Yeah. Was it difficult, or was it just something that you had agreed that you were going to do?
I think when I look back, I probably should have been a bit more considerate. But look, it was all me. It was all me chasing at the time, and I think now, and leading to where I am now, that's exactly where it slipped. And I went, well, hang on. We have been to the States. We've been down south. We've been here, there, and everywhere. The kids are young. You've just got to. Sometimes you've got to wait for the right opportunity to be on your doorstep, and I think that's kind of where I am now. But certainly back then, and even up until Stevenage, if I saw something that I was really keen on and I was given an opportunity to do it, then yeah, I would have definitely taken that risk.
Quite fortunate to have an understanding wife who would go along with that.
I think she's fed up with that now, though.
Well, they've only got another 40 or 50 years together, you know what I mean? So she can deal with it for a bit longer, maybe. You go to Morton,
Yep.
full-time club.
Yep.
You go in as general manager initially.
Right. Yep. So part-time. So again, allowing that flexibility, believe it or not, what complemented it or made it full-time, if you like, was actually the community trust. So, when I was mucking through that pandemic, I would do what I could to make a living, if you like. And whilst I was doing the football clubs, I was also open, if work needed and dictated, I would also do trusts and foundations. And so over that period, I'd done a bit of Rafe Rovers Community Foundation and a bit of Brian McLaughlin's Greenock Morton Community Trust. So I already knew a little bit about the club, although not really other than what Capello Park looks like and, kind of the history of the club. I didn't really have any involvement in any operational things at the club, and no knowledge of directors or anyone at that club other than Brian himself. But when the role came up, I thought, you know what, maybe this is something where if I'm already giving Brian some time and they only want someone part-time initially, I can combine it all with what I want to do, and ultimately what I was wanting to do was move into full-time football, so that it just seemed a nice fit.
Why was football the route you wanted to go down? Like, because you said you're working with these different charitable trusts and stuff, and I imagine it can be quite a big thing, and you can earn reasonable money doing that. Why was it that football was where you wanted to go?
I think football was just where my passion lied. I mean, not in terms of as a player, and not in terms of as ever wanting to be that. I mean, I would have loved to, but you're nowhere near good enough. But what I've always had an interest in is how businesses run, and that doesn't necessarily need to be football. But when I saw trusts and foundations, I then got the inclination to look at football models, and naturally, that's where I went.
I'm glad it's your wee and it's making a noise, and I'm hitting no mine.
It's been mine so far.
I'm still waiting on mine to come back in. You move on to be the CEO at Morton. Does that become a full-time role?
Correct, yeah. So that's the transition from part-time to full-time, if you like. And admittedly, as though, as most of the directors or anyone else would probably say, I mean, it's just at a full-time club, it's not really a part-time role. It doesn't leave you. You can go home, you can do something else, but really, your head's in it all the time. Your phone's on it all the time. And particularly through that was still, although it was the end of the pandemic, that was still the pandemic. So we obviously had that strangeness, and it was really strange in that we had the first half of the season with, kind of crowd restrictions, but at a club like Morton, you could cope with that because we weren't really over, the major restrictions in terms of our crowd attendances. But then in January, we had that mini reversal, if you remember, and actually then clubs had to ballot and let a certain amount of fans in. So we had all of that to really deal with as well. And I think it was just natural that it had to become a full-time role. And it was previously, any predecessors or former Morton Chiefs, if you like, they were always full-time. So it was a bit of a change to really have me in as part-time, which we went with, and I totally, got on board with and enjoyed, and that was what I went for initially.
You've had quite a tough spell in terms of you've had the COVID restrictions. Nobody really knew how to deal with that because obviously it was never happened before. You have new ownership coming in, also being so young. How do you feel other directors and people about the club were? I know you'd been in there as general manager, so you kind of progressed into the role. How do you feel that the more senior figures were with you, with a guy being so young in that role?
I think to be fair, everybody was always really understanding and gave me time. I mean, I think it all depends how you work. I mean, if you can put the work in, and if you can get people on side, if you can work with the existing team, and I think really it's probably, I think the directors probably look at how you work with the staff, and if you are able to work with a team, and there's people who've been at the team maybe 15, 10, 15 years at a company, if they can get on board and work with you, and they're supportive, or they want to work with you, then I think that's really your route in. And unfortunately, that's happened in the places that I've went. But if that hadn't happened, I'm not so sure whether you would have the buy-in. But I think when you've got the support of the staff, great staff everywhere I've went, and obviously sport directors as well. I mean, the directors have always given me time and always been supportive, and they've invited me back a couple of times this year as well. And yeah, they were always understanding. They knew that it was a young appointment. They knew that there was an element of risk in that. But that's always been the case. I mean, I think Atlantic City took that risk, and there's been many places who have said, don't really fancy it, Chris. And the reasons might be that we're still learning on that journey, or the reasons might have been it wasn't the right fit, in terms of age or whatever else.
Did you have any part to play with recruitment of players or the playing side of things?
Not to identifying targets in terms of budgetary setting at clubs, and in terms of making a phone call when we're doing it. If we are doing a deal, being aware and dealing with the agent or dealing with the other club, 100%. Dealing with the paperwork, the contractual stuff, 100%. In terms of deciding which players we bring in, no, that wouldn't be anything.
Just kept out the way for that.
Paper influence, yeah. I wouldn't know where to start, but that's why obviously at a club of Morton size, we trust the manager and with that. But at Stevenage we had again another great learning resource in the fact that you've got a brilliant head of recruitment / director of football as well as the manager, and again two very experienced people.
What was it like? You see the stuff with transfer deadline day. I appreciate with Morton at that level, it's no quite massive deals.
Morton was exciting that transfer deadline day. We brought in 4.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. What was it like bringing players in, and how was it dealing with agents and stuff? Like, for even though I played at a reasonable level, wasn't never dealing with agents or anything. What's it like trying to deal with agents and players on a basis where you're trying to get a deal done quite quickly?
I think it's actually usually all right. I think it's very up and down. Deals change often. What might have been agreed one day can vary the next for whichever reason at either ends of parties. Deals change or terms change. So there is a lot of dialogue in that. But in terms of when you work with the other club, you usually work with the agent to agree terms, and when you work with the other club as well, it's the clubs are really forthcoming and helpful, and particularly if you're moving into a market or you're getting someone from possibly a larger club in terms of a loan or whatever, you'll find the resources that other club will help you massively. So it's you can't really ask for a better opportunity or way of dealing with it. The only time it's a bit to and fro is obviously when you're negotiating how much the the financial implications are of the deal and the accommodation or whatever else comes with it, and naturally that's the point where deals will change or calls will end and they'll hang fire for 3 weeks, or that's really where the change lies, not so much anywhere else.
Without naming names, or you can if you want to name names, but was there anybody that was difficult, any clubs or players that were particularly difficult to deal with?
I don't think so. I actually obviously sometimes when you're dealing with players for an actual transfer, sometimes they've got agents, sometimes they don't, depending on the level. And with the loans as well, the clubs usually, what usually happens as well in football is quite a lot of your targets or recruitment or people, you tend to know what's available because there's circulars that go out. Not for me as a CEO or anyone to decide who comes in, but managers, head of recruitments, they're always aware of these circulars, who's available for loan, who's available for transfer, who do they want to go for. And because of that, you've usually got a willingness from the other place that you're working with.
I suppose
it could change when there's major money involved.
But you're only getting multi-million-pound transfer fees at Morton. Yeah. But I suppose you're saying people know who's available and whatever. And even though you'll never admit to it, but I know what it's like in football. Players are tapped up. Everybody is tapped up, where they've spoken to somebody about somebody and then they know that's the case, that a player's available and is interested. And generally, you don't get clubs going for players who have absolutely no interest in being at a club because they know they've done their due diligence. When you first went there, Gus McPherson was manager, am I right?
Yep.
Gus, guy. I know Gus. I don't really know Gus. He was my brother's manager at St Mirren, and he actually took me at Kilmarnock at like under 10s or 11s. So 25 years ago, Gus took a couple of training sessions I was in. But what's it like dealing with a guy like Gus McPherson? I know you said obviously in terms of picking players and recruitment, you didn't have much to do with that. But did you have a lot of day-to-day dealing with him, or was it no really something you did?
Yeah. Gus worked incredibly hard, and I learned so much from Gus, you know that. But I think Gus day to day managed football, and day to day I managed non-football. So there wasn't really a crossover, if you like, in terms of any real key football decisions. That was always left, and that's been the same anywhere I went, whether it was Dougie, whether it was Steve Evans, even whether it was Christian back in Atlantic City. I've always followed the model that the person in charge of running the business it should be hands off, right? Managers of any departments are there to manage, so you leave them to do that, right? And you by all means agree budgets and you agree parameters, but it should be the manager's decision in that respect. And so Gus was someone I had quite regular contact with most days, but he was always on a a working relationship and a friendly relationship, and we got on great.
You see, with certain clubs, that I look back to Hearts under Romanov, and I appreciate he put a lot of money in and was a bit mental as well with the fact that he wanted to have a big say in things. Was there ever times where I get the impression you're being genuine when you say that the manager manages and you deal with your side of the business, but was there ever times where the club wasn't doing so well, the team wasn't performing like he's as a CEO and a board would hope they would? Was there ever times that you'd be like, there's something we should probably do here and step in and say something, or did you just allow it to be what it was?
I think everybody is always trying, though, whether it's from the manager's level at any of the clubs I've been at, or whether it's the off the pitch. I mean, you're always thinking about, how you get the next win, or how you bring out the next product that's going to bring in income to support what you want to do as a club. So I think there's always that pressure. I think in what I have experienced throughout camps is I've experienced massive highs and massive lows, as is everybody else with me in that, and that when you are as a club struggling, then it's tough on everybody. The atmosphere's tense. It can be really isolating for everybody involved. And then when you're winning, it can be massive highs. It's that's why we love football, right? The highs are so high, and the lows are rough. But I think that everybody feels the pressure and everybody works incredibly hard. It's tough when decisions have to be made at a board level or anywhere else, but I think ultimately you're always just looking at how do we keep moving the club forward, how do we keep a club in a certain division, how do we move a club into the next division, and that's always those calls. But I think a lot of those there's a lot that the manager can influence in terms of training and match day, but I think a lot of where a club's going to go can be influenced off the pitch. So you've got to provide the best budget that's possible, right? You've got to provide the best infrastructure that's possible. That's really where the passion and the interest lies. You've got to be able to develop that for a manager to do well.
There's two things I'm going to go into there that you've touched on. You talk about the budget, which is obviously a big part of what you're having to do, try and increase the budget. Morton, for me, they're a kind of funny club. They're like a bit of an underlier where, with the attendances they can get, they could be a Premier League club, and they were a Premier League club years gone by, but obviously slipped right down the division, starting to come back up. They just missed out in the playoffs this year. I thought Dougie did a very, very good job.
Very good, yeah.
But how difficult is it to increase the budget of a club like that? I mean, I know Greenock reasonably well and Inverclyde quite well. I played for Port Glasgow for a few years. I've got mates that are from that area who support the club. I know a couple of the guys that are, I don't know if they're board members, but they're involved with the club as well at Morton.
Yeah,
and like I said, with Brian as well, I'm kind of pally with Brian. So it's a club that I understand a wee bit about. But how difficult is it to increase the revenue and get the community involved in the club to boost the revenue as much as you can?
It's massively difficult, but it's not insurmountable. I think it just comes down to time and resources, right? And I think that the club's really going to take off. We're already seeing that, because what we're getting is more time and more resources through the fan ownership partly, and through also the new commercial deals that they've done. But I think you've got to be able to go out and chase these deals, and I'm not sure that that's something we've always had the time or the resources to do. I mean, at Stevenage, I was, blessed to have about 130, 140 staff across, multiple sites. And then you go to Morton and everybody's working incredibly hard. But if you've only got 10, 15 staff across everything from football to off the pitch, and I'm not including the players in that, then the resources are limited. But I think what the new opportunity and what we're seeing is that you've now got the involvement of the Morton Club together. You've now got more bodies there that can come in and support and take on tasks and skills that they've got, because a lot of these people are very highly skilled, and they're maybe just working in different industries. But I think, the more you can build up your commercial department. So I know, for example, this year, even with me not being there, it's expanded. The club's probably seen the results of that. If you got more people out and chasing these deals and getting in front of businesses, I mean, it's a huge area. And I know that it's not without its challenges like everywhere else, but I really think that the sky's the limit for it if they can keep pulling them off. And what you also have to remember is that I always sit and think, like, what could happen at some of these clubs if I had more time to just solely chase that? But that's not that role. The role is to do that when you've got time, but to also manage other things. And I think that's been the telling story for so much of what happens behind the scenes in football, is that we would all love to chase it, but we get sucked into other things that are going on day to day within the club that then limit that opportunity.
What's the pressure like? Obviously, when Gus McPherson was there, the club were more trying to stay in the league. And then you see this year, like, I think it was goal difference the club missed it in the playoffs this year.
In fact, was it not a disallowed Inverness goal in stoppage time that might have changed it?
You know what I mean? That's how tight it is. What's the pressures like at a club like Morton? And I suppose you see it with like Partick Thistle, your Inverness. Basically, most teams in the first division who are full-time, what's the pressures like around the place when, see if it's not going particularly well and that a playoff or a relegation could lead to people losing their jobs? I mean, the club possibly going part-time. Again, Morton have always been able to stay full-time because they are quite a big club. But what's the pressures like at a club like that?
I mean, the pressure's there constantly. And whether that is, trying to stay in the division or whether that's trying to get up and out of it, I mean, regardless of which club you come to, the pressures are there. I think that certainly last season the objective was to stay in the league. This year the progress has been phenomenal, and I know that there's new sponsorship on board, there's new partnerships in the works, and there's so much more activity going on. But I think what we managed to do the season before with where we were at and what our objectives were, I think we did achieve it. And I think it was a hard journey. And I think everybody played a massive part, and that goes right back to Gus's involvement all the way through to Dougie.
You touched on it earlier. It was something I was going to ask you. The highs and the lows. Now, I found that I've coached and managed teams as well, which I suppose is a bit different for your role. But as a player, you do get the highs and lows. But you're always thinking, well, there's another game I can go and try and improve or whatever. But in management, I found that the highs were so unbelievably high and the lows were so unbelievably low. Like, I would come home and it would impact my family life, and that was amateur football. I was coaching it. Yep. Is it the same for you? You're so desperate for the team to do well, even in your role.
I think it's that across the board, but those highs and lows don't just translate to the football. They translate to season ticket sales, to a product coming out. They transform to literally attendances. Everything bothers and controls you. But it's because also there's a big responsibility on your shoulders, right? Because you have a board of directors who massively support you, but they also trust you to manage a business, prudently, financially, to do it well within budget, and to also make savings wherever possible. And the pressure and the challenges come from the nature of football. I mean, you asked me why I wanted to get involved, but it's a business like no other. I mean, you don't get many businesses that are so cash rich in the summer and then cash poor in the end of the season. So actually structuring how you're going to do that and work within your means is it's like no other, and that's the challenge that everybody does and enjoys. And actually trying to move away from this idea of, we gather it all at the start of the season and transition more into models where stuff comes in month to month. That's really been where my passion lies and what it's been all about.
See, that's something that fans, I suppose, don't think about. How how do you go about, like you're saying, transitioning to month to month? How would you go about going for being cash rich at the start of the season to being sustainable pretty much the whole time and no worrying all the time about the fact that the money's starting to run out here?
I think it's just changing the model from when you do that cash flow forecast, and you've got to switch it slowly and progressively into month to month income coming in for the football club. So you've obviously got your games throughout the season, but you've only got what 18, 20 home games a year. That's 18, 20 home games of income you can forecast for. But are you doing events every week? Also, when you're taking season ticket money, are you taking it all at the start of the year? You're gonna take it all at the start of the year, then release it slowly throughout the football club month to month, so you're not burning through it. I think there's so many ways of doing it. Traditionally, obviously, I look at things differently, but I look at clubs and I see, maybe if a half season tickets are going out, I usually look at when they're going out, because to me it would look like, well, maybe if I'm putting them out, very early months, maybe that money needs to come in a bit quicker, and then you make sure you use it properly because you don't want to burn through it too early either. And I think that's really where the life is dictated behind the scenes in terms of what I do. So we try not to worry. We try and support. I try and support the football managers, but really the only worry is looking after the financial health of the football club, and that's what you feel the responsibility with at all times.
Gus leaves the club and Dougie comes in. Were you involved in any of the decision making, or is that the board members, or was there a kind of committee that dealt with it?
Yeah, so that was obviously that was the board. Dougie would have had involvement with me in terms of when he was coming into the business, but that was a board decision. So the board, the collective of MCT and club board coming together and make that appointment. And to be fair, he's not done too bad. He's done really quite well. And what I've loved is as well is that the progress is there, right? So he's came in, he's worked incredibly hard, and obviously we managed to stay up, and now look at this year, like you said, just inches off that playoff, and it certainly looks like it's moving forwards at all times.
Did you have to have a meeting with him and basically explain, look, this is your budget, this is what you can do?
Yeah.
And like I know Dougie a wee bit. I played with McClyde. I was one of the young boys when he was in the first team at Clyde. Did he understand and grasp it quite quickly what was required at a full-time club?
He did, and obviously when you're coming with budgets in that position, it is tough and it is a challenge, but he always rolled up his sleeves and embraced it. I think it's always a difficult conversation because you're not necessarily always delivering. Sometimes you are, but you're not always necessarily delivering budgets that a manager would ideally want or a manager would ideally need. But I think I think that constant conversation and dialogue and actually support one another to say, well, what can we do here? And I think that's always been a strength.
I know people, basically, the football is like everybody knows everybody. So you know things and you hear things. So I know somebody that was asked to come in and help Dougie, and basically the money that was on offer was just, it couldn't sustain the guy to have his family and be full time. That's a really difficult position to be in, I suppose, for a manager. But again, it's difficult for you where you're, like you said, you're having to say to him, this is what you have. Would you get times you come to you and say, look, I need more? And
I think not specific. I think across yeah, of course. I mean, I think it's always a conversation of, right, well, what can we do? What can we do off the pitch to drive that and change that? And it's all very much depending on whether you can do it or not, right? You can only spend what you've got, but developing initiatives off the pitch and supplementary incomes, if you grow them, then that aids those decisions, doesn't it? So there's always a lot of pressure, and I think there's a lot of pressure to provide that for. We always want to provide that for people as best we can, and we try our hardest, right? You're not trying to not achieve the same thing. You're completely on the same page at all times.
You've had your time at Morton, then the Stevenage opportunity arises. What was your thought process at that time when you were going to be going for there?
I think it was probably part of the final learning process. So for me, it was like, okay, my eyes are open. I've had a chance now in Scotland. We've had, a really challenging, busy, and non-stop year. We've got to the end of it. And, I think there was an opportunity there where Stevenage were basically saying, Chris, how about a different challenge? I know what the plan is for next year. This is what we want you to lead on. Do you want to be a part of it? And I think I saw that, and obviously it was coming in off the back of a fairly experienced guy. I mean, it was Dominic Jordan, who's Simon Jordan,
That's right.
his brother. He was the previous one to me. So coming in there and picking up off that and really kicking forward. But what I loved and what I wanted that shot at was the infrastructure. So it was the 130 staff. What are you going to do with them? It was the 4 sites, supplementary incomes. I mean, Stevenage Football Club had its own training ground. It had its own academy/leisure centre. So when the academy wasn't running during the day, you had a full hub of activity supporting it from power league to leisure leagues in the evening. You had a nursery, so you had the opportunity there as well. You're looking at your work life balance, going, well, we own a nursery, so the young kids could go there. They could be close to their dad during the day, and then actually also having a nursery is another income into the football club. So it was just like an eye opener. It was a completely different opportunity. But I always maintain that if you took the level of support and investment in infrastructure in the game that's down there and put it up here, you would see the same results.
It's mad to think Stevenage League Two at the time. Mm-hmm. It's crazy to think that they have that infrastructure in place. I mean, I suppose that's people who have done their job well. Like that nursery thing it's a good idea for an extra income, and it also is probably good for players and their families and work-life balance. Mm-hmm. So, have Stevenage approached you? Were you in communication with them before, or was it out the blue that they've approached you?
No, I did know a couple of the directors. So when they approached in the summer to say, well, look, Chris, we've got this opportunity. Do you want to come and be a part of it? It felt like the right time, and I think it probably was, and I'm so glad I'd done it. And fast forward to where we are now, and we'll come to that. But I think it was exactly how I expected the opportunity to be, and I loved every minute.
How was it leaving Morton?
Leaving Morton was tough, because I felt like we'd achieved so much and we'd worked very hard to get there. So I still think about the club. I still watch out for the results. I still a couple of times a season go down and join the directors and catch up. So yeah, we'll always have a fond place. But I think selfishly, I really wanted that shot down south.
It's fair enough. I suppose even for, you see, it's a big thing with players who want the opportunity to go down south. I'd imagine at every level at a club, that's kind of where you aim to be. You go in with Steve Evans, who is massively experienced, done a lot in the game, player and as a manager. What's it like getting into work with a guy like that? And to add on to that, you're talking about the 130 staff or 100 odd staff. What's that like transitioning from Morton, where it's small scale, to a much larger scale?
It wasn't a much larger scale, but it was a lot of the same principles. So that was helpful because what we'd found is that maybe what you've been doing at Morton, you would be doing as much more of a small team. Well, now actually you could individually delegate some of these tasks, and actually that was fantastic to experience and be able to work with people on that. And I think that coming at Stevenage, Steve Evans, right? The experience was nice. Experience is, what a guy. I've learned so much from him. He look at what he's done this year, right? He's transformed it, but even from an infrastructure level, learning from the opportunity to learn from the chairman as well. And it's very much the chairman's club now. He's owned it for over 20 years. And incredibly successful in his own right. And what he's done, he's changed the infrastructure over the years. If you take the stadium 20 years ago and what it is now, you've got a brand new £2 million stand, which only really over the last 12 months been able to see crowds in it because it was built during the pandemic. And you've also had a club which has kind of had a couple of seasons of struggling and hanging in there, and then Steve just came in and transformed the side, right? But I think a lot of the positive progress that's been made is from this idea that, see, if you do develop off the pitch, it starts to translate. So the owner wanted to develop that new stand and look at the impact of that now being finished, and actually now that money being reappropriated and developing it's a fantastic effect that it has.
You're talking about development off the pitch. Again, as a normal football fan, I consider myself to be, it's not something you think about greatly. You think about transfer fees that the club bring in and season tickets, shirt sales, the obvious things. But then you touched on the nursery being a big thing. I'm a Celtic fan. Celtic have spoken in the last couple of years about having a hotel outside the stadium, stuff like that to generate revenue. Is there any particular things that you brought in at Morton or Stevenage that you feel like was a good way of bringing in extra revenue for the club?
I think this transition as well from it's probably it does get done, but one of the big things that I was a believer in was people changing from being able to pay. So if you go and get a sponsor on board and day one taking all that money up front, or actually just saying to them, look, do you want to pay 250, 500 quid a month to the club? Because actually what you find is it's that Netflix effect, but on businesses. Well, is it low enough that they don't ever really need to think about cancelling it? Does it keep them engaged? And actually, what can you give them over the 12 months that it's like a subscription? They're getting perks out of it. And I think that's been a big part of it. The other thing that I really bring in, and I think that I worry about more than others, it's just if you want somebody to watch cash flow finances, football finances, that is my bag, and that's what I love. So I will watch every penny in and out. I will plan for it. We'll forecast for it. And ultimately, when somebody sees that massive cup draw and they see, oh, we're going to Celtic away. Well, what I see is, well, actually, that's a massive gate that we're going to be splitting, and I see that the same when I see Aberdeen Darvel, and when I see everything else, I think, oh my God, look at the financial implications that's going to have on them. And, even if you took Stevenage back in the day with that former venue, I mean, when they got Newcastle and Tottenham in the FA Cups, well, the club will openly tell you it's gates like that actually funded the stadium into what it is now. And that's probably been the same at many clubs. It's incredible what, cup runs and what that can do, but it's also a difficult model to forecast on. So that's why it's so imperative that you get the businesses on board differently, because there could be very much a season where you don't have progress on any of those fronts, and you need to be ready to still be able to make it work.
I think that you've said there about clubs paying through sponsorship paying through the months. I think it's a very obvious thing when you say it, but I'd imagine like my small involvement with St. Peter's, where you were trying to get sponsorship, and it would be like a really small scale. Could a company give us £500 for the season? And you're like, maybe if you did it, what if you gave us £75 a month for the 9 months, and you end up you're making a slight bit more money, but it seems like a much less hit to a company that make okay money. £75 a month is nothing to them, you know what I mean?
Especially if if you're pricing things as whatever they might pay for the Photoshop or for another subscription that they've got as a business, then you're really in the market where you're probably going to have that long-term business.
I suppose being like clubs, if they're charitable funds as well, then companies will get tax benefits in doing it. You've ended up having to leave Stevenage early this year, February. Could you go into the reasons why you had to leave early?
Yeah, well, to be fair, the ownership knew. We all knew from kind of late 2022. But my daughter, she would have been just younger, but she's now 20 months just now. But she was diagnosed with a rare kind of heart condition, if you like, called AVSD. I won't try and say the name. It's like atrioventricular defect. But anyway, it's almost so you get the hole in the heart with the four chambers combined, but also like a leaky valve, which basically it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and so it caused a lot of problems for her, from weight loss through to some other breathing and other issues that she had there. And ultimately what was happening was, and this was part and parcel of the reason, but she was ultimately probably getting progressively worse, if you like, and she needed surgery. So usually for a kind of healthy child with that condition, they might get to 3 or 4 and need a form of surgery, but she basically needed open heart surgery at the end of January into February, which is when we came back. And ultimately it got to a point where she just wasn't really doing the things that she was supposed to. So that kind of got in the way to a point where I was also feeling a little bit guilty about, look at how much time I spend at a football club. How much time do we, have I been investing in this? And so, family first. My wife also wanted, we all close up the family, back up the road. You've dragged everybody down, right? And you hardly see them as it is from your working hours, and that's part and parcel of what you signed up to. But it's also just a change in circumstances, and so I really just felt and we all just, I'd said to the club were very supportive of me the whole time. But, I just felt like, given where the club was in that push, they still needed somebody to drive that behind the scenes. And, my daughter was in, Children's Hospital for a couple of weeks in Glasgow. And it's like, how do you manage that? You can't really run a football club up here and do that. It was just a combination of factors. So yeah, I came back up the road, and went out, my final game in January being the 3-0 win over Leyton Orient when it was looking, we were still mounting that title challenge. So it was nice, to be invited back. As I said, I went to Barrow away just on Monday for the bank holiday, just to say goodbye to everybody, and to cap off a wonderful season, from up to the next league. So we'll see how that develops.
How was that for you personally? That must have been really difficult. I appreciate very difficult for your wife as well. I've got young kids, so I can only imagine how hard and scary it would be that your young child is going through such a major thing at such a young age.
Yeah, I think that was it, and I think also probably a lot of guilt about whether or not I'd been as on the ball with it as we should have been. But ultimately, we made the right decision. I know we made the right decision. We're back. She's post-op and she's like a different girl, and that was all we wanted and could have asked for. And I think that was it's part and parcel of it. So yeah, I think potentially when she's older, we may need to get another little thing done for her. But night and day, and it's wonderful what those surgeons can do.
Well, that's excellent. I'm glad she's on the mend, and there seemed to be no issue with her lungs earlier anyway.
I'm mad at me.
See, to be honest, it's really difficult. I was, I don't know how your kids have been and stuff. Like growing up, my two never slept well at all. Like I don't. There's 3 years between 3 years and 4 days between my two, and genuinely, I think that I didn't get a full night's sleep unless they were at my mum's house for 4 years. It was just horrendously difficult. What was that like for you, having a young family, particularly your daughter being no well and trying to run a club? I know you're saying you kind of felt like a bit of guilt and stuff.
I think for me, I wish I could say that that it had taken more of it, but I think it was all my wife. It really was. And that's part of why I have to kind of look at what I do now and how we move forward, because ultimately it was my wife that she held everything down. She took on all of that. That's really part and parcel of some of the implications. I mean, football just, it demands your whole life, and that's what we give to, and that's what we like. But it's it can be full on, and sometimes like even in this period where you're back and you're doing other things, you just think, wow, like I haven't seen a Saturday in so long, and so it's been a massive change. But I think if I had been in any other line of work, I probably would have seen that. But I think that everyone was supportive of me entirely. But I think just watching the progression of it just wasn't, kind of what we'd expected. And then you're combining that with the fact that you've maybe been, prioritizing everything else as you do within a football club to try and make those things happen, particularly in a season like that. And it was just that snowball effect. I mean, you get to February and you've done a lot of the core things which are getting ready for the following season, if that makes sense, off the pitch. So you're already deep into, designing, getting new kits ready. You're deep into new sponsorships for next year. You're deep into, renewing and sorting managers' contracts. You're already deep into those processes. So yeah, it all just came at once, and a fantastic club. And what I loved was that you get this idea of, well, if you go into a football club and you get more resources, you can achieve more things, and it really is the case, and it continues to be the case. And actually, I would love to see Atlantic City. I would love to see other clubs have these resources, because what you can do is wonderful.
It's funny you say, like, you're running a football club and it's all consuming. I've seen that as a player where your mindset is completely different, where you're training, you have games or whatever. You don't think about it. As a coach, it's always constant. Like for me, doing managing, it was like a full-time job on top of my job. And you say there, you're doing so much, but I look at, like, you get to that stage where you're already talking about January, February comes and you're looking at next season. And I remember my wife getting upset with me. Then the season ended. I had a reasonably kind of good amateur team that I took, and the season ended. And she went, "Oh, well, that's good. You've given a lot of time this year. You can take a break for a wee bit, and then you can go next season." I was like, "No, this is where it gets busy." I was like,
Yeah.
"I need to sign new players. I need to keep my players." And I think that at any other line of work, you'd be like, "Oh no, I'm taking a day off. I'm doing this." But when it comes to football, it seems universal that people involved in football are just like, "No, you always need to be there. You always need to do something."
And I think that's it. I mean, right, we had the World Cups at the club, and we're just like, right, okay, can we get this stadium open just from the World Cup? Can we get people in watching it? You're just constantly thinking about that next penny you can churn into the football club at any opportunity. And it's not to be negative. It just consumes you, right? You live and breathe it, and you want to see anywhere you are do so well, and especially when you're a part of it, is that team spirit, it's that camaraderie. Even though you're not playing on the pitch, you still want to influence what happens, or you want to help by developing infrastructure off the pitch that everybody can be pleased with.
Now you're away from Stevenage. You've seen your time at Atlantic City, basically being a big part of that club starting. See, Morton are now progressing and getting better, and I think if they can keep doing it, I think they're in a really good position for promotion next season or playoffs. Stevenage promoted into League One now. How does it feel for you being part of basically at different levels, success stories like that at clubs?
I mean, I think a lot of the promotions, a lot of the finishing and the placements, ultimately they fall on the manager, right? That's the manager, his players, that's everybody there that's put the work in. That's got nothing really to do with off the pitch as such. But I would love to say that everybody at the clubs, gets on and feels like they were a part of that. I really do think that those accomplishments often fall within the players who put the effort in and the managers. But I think definitely where I've had a sense of accomplishment is even at Morton. We touched on Morton in the community and Brian McLaughlin. I think a big sense of accomplishment was actually that when my daughter when she was just not long, but she was still very young at the time, we put the sensory room in at Capel, and it's just a daft thing like that, but it was a disused functional space in the ground, and actually you put it in, and the memories I have is actually late at night, my wife, my children, everybody in getting involved and being a part of pulling that together, and making that space. And it's moments like that you take away. I think if you can leave stuff on the infrastructure, if you can leave stuff on, if you can try and improve the camp. I think a lot of what you're doing off the pitch is, alleviating fears, calming pressures down. It is a very emotional environment. It's a very driven. The highs are so high for everybody. So you're constantly picking people up. You're constantly trying to motivate people. You're constantly trying to reassure people when things are tough. And that's not necessarily at a football level. That can actually be, if you're working in sales or you're working in, even as a club secretary in a football club, it's taxing and it's tiring and it's tough. And, there's times when people do need that lift.
I think that is a great thing. I remember seeing it on Twitter because I follow the Morton and the community stuff, and I remember thinking that was a really great thing that the club started. Now you've got your time away from football. What is next for you? Where are you looking to go with your career?
I think obviously one day, I think for sure I would love to return to running the club. I think naturally the market's very small. I think it would have to be in Central and the West, just from where I am, and we know that there's not a lot of roles, right? So I'm incredibly blessed to have an opportunity that keeps a roof over my head, to incredibly supportive and driven businessmen helping me there, and I think I'm learning a lot from them. Again, one of them does own a football club, so that helps in itself, although he owns a football club down south, so it's not necessarily where my ambitions lie, but in terms of what I'm learning and taking from it is massive.
We're just going to finish up. I think that you should maybe try and help at my club, no Celtic, my other club, Port Glasgow Juniors.
Okay.
I think you should look and see if you could help them. And I tell you what, if you ever want to help me get any sponsorships so that I don't need to keep paying for all this myself, you're more than welcome to do that. But look, Chris, I've genuinely really enjoyed this chat. I hope you have, mate, and I really appreciate you giving up your time.
Listen, thanks so much, mate. All right, all the best. Take care.
Thank you very much. And everybody, if you could like this episode and subscribe to the channel, it makes a huge difference to me. And thanks for watching. Cheers.